Emma Carter stood before the mirror in her modest Toronto condo, fastening the clasp of a stunning diamond necklace. The weight of the jewels felt foreign against her skin, a stark contrast to the practical scrubs she wore daily as a nurse at Toronto General Hospital. Her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the intricate design, each diamond catching the soft bedroom light and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. It was their 15th wedding anniversary, and her husband Daniel had surprised her with this extravagant gift. As she admired the necklace, a mix of emotions swirled within her: joy, confusion, and an unsettling twinge of suspicion. "Emma, are you ready?" Daniel's voice called from the living room, snapping her out of her reverie. "Just a moment," she replied, taking a deep breath to compose herself. She smoothed down her navy blue dress, a simple yet elegant number she'd bought years ago for special occasions. It felt a bit snug now, a reminder of the passing years and the comfortable routine their life had settled into. As she stepped into the living room, Daniel's eyes widened. "Wow," he breathed, a smile spreading across his face. "You look beautiful, Em." Emma felt a flush creep up her cheeks. Even after all these years, Daniel's compliments could make her feel like the young nurse he'd fallen in love with. But as she studied his face, the new lines around his eyes, the slight graying at his temples, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Thank you for the necklace, Daniel. It's incredible," she said, her voice catching slightly. "But it must have cost a fortune. Are you sure we can afford this?" Daniel's smile faltered for a split second before he recovered. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart. You deserve it. Now, shall we? Our reservation is at 8. As they drove to the restaurant, Emma found herself lost in thought. The past few months had been different. Daniel, usually so attentive and present, had grown distant. Late nights at the office had become more frequent, and when he was home, he seemed distracted, often lost in his phone or laptop. The restaurant was one of Toronto's finest, with a view overlooking the glittering city skyline. As they were led to their table, Emma noticed several patrons eyeing her necklace appreciatively. She felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a pang of guilt. This wasn't like them, the extravagant gift, the high-end restaurant. Their life had always been comfortable, but modest, focused on building a future together, rather than flashy displays of wealth. Over dinner, Emma tried to engage Daniel in conversation, hoping to recapture some of the easy banter they once shared. But his responses were brief, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Daniel," she said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied." He startled slightly at her touch, then gave her a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's fine, Em. Just some work stress. You know how it is." But she didn't know. Not anymore. There was a time when Daniel would share every detail of his day with her, seeking her advice on difficult clients or celebrating small victories together. Now, it felt like there was a wall between them, and this necklace, beautiful as it was, felt like another brick in that wall. As they finished their meal and headed home, Emma found herself stealing glances at Daniel's profile as he drove. The man beside her was still her husband, still the person she loved more than anyone in the world. But for the first time in their marriage, she felt like she was looking at a stranger. Back in their apartment, as Emma carefully removed the necklace and placed it in its velvet box, she made a decision. Something was going on with Daniel, and she was determined to find out what it was. Their life together, the life they'd built with love, trust, and countless small sacrifices, was too precious to let slip away without a fight. The following morning, Emma woke to an empty bed, the indent on Daniel's pillow already cool. A note on the nightstand read, "Early meeting. Didn't want to wake you. Love you." She sighed, running her fingers over his hastily scrawled words. There was a time when he would have woken her with a kiss, no matter how early he had to leave. As she went about her morning routine, Emma's eyes kept drifting to the jewelry box containing the necklace. It sat on her dresser, an elegant intruder in their modest bedroom. She opened it, the diamonds catching the morning light, beautiful and cold. While preparing her coffee, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Lisa. "Lunch today? Need to hear all about the anniversary." Emma smiled, grateful for the distraction. "Definitely. Usual place at 1. At the hospital, Emma threw herself into her work, finding comfort in the familiar routines of checking vitals, administering medications, and comforting patients. But even as she focused on her tasks, doubts niggled at the back of her mind. When her lunch break finally arrived, Emma practically rushed to the small cafe where she and Lisa had been meeting for years. The cafe, nestled in a quiet corner of bustling Queen West, was their sanctuary, a place where they could share their triumphs and troubles over steaming lattes and homemade sandwiches. Lisa was already there, her wild curls bouncing as she waved Emma over. "Okay, Spilly," Lisa exclaimed as soon as Emma sat down. "How was the big night?" Emma hesitated, then pulled out her phone to show Lisa a picture of the necklace. Lisa's eyes widened. "Holy cow, Em. That must have cost a fortune." "That's just it," Emma said, lowering her voice. "I don't know how we can afford something like this, and Daniel's been different lately." Lisa's expression grew serious. "Different how?" As their sandwiches arrived, grilled vegetable for Emma, chicken avocado for Lisa, Emma poured out her concerns. She told Lisa about the late nights, the distraction, the sudden extravagance that felt so out of character. Lisa listened intently, her forehead creasing with worry. "Em," she said gently, "I hate to ask this, but do you think there could be someone else?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. "No," she said immediately, but even as the word left her mouth, she felt a seed of doubt take root. I don't think so. Daniel wouldn't." Lisa reached across the table, squeezing Emma's hand. "I'm sure there's an explanation. But honey, you need to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is." Emma nodded, blinking back tears. "But what do I do? I can't just accuse him without any proof." "Start with the necklace," Lisa suggested. "Find out where it came from. That might give you some answers." As Emma walked back to the hospital, Lisa's words echoed in her mind. The idea of investigating her own husband felt wrong, like a betrayal of the trust they'd built over 15 years. But the alternative, letting her marriage slip away without a fight, was unthinkable. That evening, as Daniel once again worked late, Emma sat on their bed, the jewelry box open beside her. She picked up the necklace, its weight substantial in her hands. This piece of jewelry held answers, she was sure of it, and she was going to find them. With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone and searched for the name of the jewelry store etched on the box. It was an upscale boutique in Yorkville, the kind of place she and Daniel had always walked past but never entered. Taking a deep breath, Emma made a decision. Tomorrow, she would visit the store. Whatever the truth was, she needed to face it head on. As she closed the jewelry box with a soft snap, Emma felt a mix of determination and fear. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. The next afternoon, Emma found herself standing in front of Belmont & Co., the jewelry store's elegant facade a stark contrast to the bustling Yorkville street. Her heart raced as she pushed open the heavy glass door, a soft chime announcing her entrance. The interior was all polished wood and gleaming glass, with spotlights illuminating displays of dazzling jewels. Emma felt immediately out of place in her casual clothes, acutely aware of the curious glances from the impeccably dressed staff. A tall, slender woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair approached her. "Good afternoon, madam. How may I assist you today?" Emma swallowed hard, summoning her courage. I'd like to speak with the manager, please. It's about a recent purchase." The woman's eyebrow arched slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. Please, follow me." Emma was led to a small private consultation room at the back of the store. Moments later, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered, his manner polite but reserved. "Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Belmont, the owner. I understand you have a query about a purchase." Emma nodded, her mouth dry. She carefully placed the jewelry box on the table between them and opened it. "This necklace was given to me as an anniversary gift. I need to know who purchased it." Mr. Belmont's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm afraid we can't disclose that information, madam. Customer privacy is paramount in our business." "Please," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. My husband, I don't think he could have afforded this. There must be some mix-up." Something in her tone must have reached Mr. Belmont. His expression softened slightly. "Madam, I assure you, there's been no mistake. This piece was indeed purchased from our store. Emma leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Can you at least tell me when it was bought? Or if it was a man or a woman who bought it? Mr. Belmont hesitated, clearly torn between his professional discretion and the distress evident on Emma's face. Finally, he sighed. The necklace was purchased 2 weeks ago. By a man. Emma felt a momentary relief, quickly replaced by renewed confusion. Was he in his 40s? Dark hair, about 6 feet tall? The jeweler's hesitation told Emma everything she needed to know before he even spoke. No, madam. The gentleman was older, in his 60s, I'd say. Distinguished looking. Gray hair. The room seemed to spin around Emma. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. I don't understand, she whispered. Mr. Belmont leaned forward, his voice gentle. If I may, the gentleman mentioned it was a gift for a business associate's wife. An anniversary present, I believe. Emma's mind raced, trying to make sense of this new information. A business associate? But why would Daniel pretend the gift was from him? And why such an expensive present from a business contact? Thank you, she managed to say, rising on shaky legs. You've been very helpful. As Emma stepped back onto the busy street, her mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. The necklace, which had seemed like a symbol of love just days ago, now felt like a heavy burden around her neck. She pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over Daniel's number. But what would she say? How could she confront him without knowing the full story? As she walked home, each step feeling heavier than the last, Emma knew that her world had shifted. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And whatever it was, she had to face it. For herself, for Daniel, and for the love they had built together over 15 years. With a deep breath, Emma straightened her shoulders. It was time to get answers, no matter how difficult they might be to hear. Emma paced the living room of their condo, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet she and Daniel had chosen together years ago. Every familiar object now seemed to mock her with memories of happier times. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the agonizing minutes until Daniel's return. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Toronto skyline, the CN Tower illuminated against the darkening sky. It was a view they had both fallen in love with when they first moved in, a symbol of their shared dreams and aspirations. Now it felt like a stark reminder of how far they had drifted apart. At last she heard the jingle of keys in the lock. Daniel stepped inside, his tie loosened and briefcase in hand. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than ever. Em? You're still up? He asked, surprise evident in his voice. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. We need to talk, Daniel. He froze, sensing the gravity in her tone. Slowly, he set down his briefcase and moved to sit on the couch. Emma remained standing, needing the physical distance to maintain her resolve. What's going on? Daniel asked, his voice cautious. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the jewelry box. She placed it on the coffee table between them, the soft thud echoing in the tense silence. I went to the jewelry store today, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I know you didn't buy this necklace, Daniel. I know it was from a business associate. The color drained from Daniel's face. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. Please, Emma continued, her composure beginning to crack. Just tell me the truth. What's really going on? Daniel buried his face in his hands for a moment, then looked up at Emma, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and fear. I'm so sorry, Em. I never meant for things to get this complicated. Over the next hour, the truth spilled out. Daniel's business, which had always been stable if not wildly successful, had hit hard times. A series of poor investments and a major client backing out had left him teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Too proud to admit his failures and terrified of disappointing Emma, he had tried to handle it alone. The necklace, Daniel explained, his voice hoarse. It was from Mr. Thompson. He's a potential investor I've been courting. When he found out it was our anniversary, he insisted on giving you a gift. I couldn't say no without explaining why, and I was so desperate to keep the deal alive. Emma listened, her heart breaking not just for herself, but for Daniel. She could see the toll this secrecy had taken on him. the weight of his fears evident in every line of his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're supposed to be partners, Daniel. In everything." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I was ashamed, Em. You work so hard, saving lives every day. And here I was, failing at the one thing I was supposed to be good at. I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know." Emma moved to sit beside him on the couch, close but not touching. "Do you remember our vows, for better or for worse? This is the worst part, Daniel. But we're supposed to face it together." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" Emma felt her own eyes filling with tears. The anger and fear she had been holding onto began to dissolve, replaced by a profound sadness for the man she loved, who had been silently drowning in his struggles. "No," she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. "But we have a lot of work to do. No more secrets, Daniel. Promise me." He nodded, squeezing her hand. "I promise. God, Em, I'm so sorry." As the night wore on, they talked more than they had in months. Daniel laid bare the extent of his business troubles, and together they began to sketch out a plan for moving forward. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, they were facing their challenges as a team. When exhaustion finally overtook them in the early hours of the morning, they fell asleep on the couch, hands still intertwined. The necklace lay forgotten on the coffee table, its sparkle dimmed in the faint pre-dawn light. It was no longer a symbol of their problems, but a reminder of the honesty and trust they needed to rebuild. The next few days passed in a blur of emotional conversations and practical planning. Emma had taken a few days off work, recognizing that her marriage needed her full attention right now. She and Daniel had agreed to full transparency moving forward, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. "I think we need to look into this, Mr. Thompson," Emma said over breakfast one morning. They were sitting at their small kitchen island, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. "Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me." Daniel nodded, pushing his barely touched oatmeal away. "You're right. I was so focused on saving the business that I didn't question his motives. It's not exactly standard practice to give such lavish gifts to a potential business partner's wife." Emma reached for her phone. "I'm going to ask Lisa for help. She works in finance. She might be able to dig up some information." A few hours later, Emma and Lisa were huddled over Lisa's laptop in a quiet corner of their favorite cafe. The bustling sounds of Queen West filtered through the windows, a stark contrast to the intense focus of the two women inside. Lisa's fingers flew over the keyboard as she navigated through financial databases and public records. "Okay," Lisa said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This Mr. Thompson, Alistair Thompson, he's got quite a history. He's been involved in several businesses over the past 2 decades, mostly in real estate and development." Emma leaned in closer, scanning the screen. "Anything suspicious?" Lisa bit her lip. "Well, nothing overtly illegal, but there's a pattern here. He tends to invest in struggling businesses, but the outcomes are inconsistent. Some companies recover and thrive, but others, it looks like he strips them for assets and moves on." A chill ran down Emma's spine. "So Daniel's company could be at risk?" "It's possible," Lisa admitted. "But look at this. There are also several lawsuits mentioned, former business partners claiming manipulation and financial coercion. None of them stuck legally, but it paints a concerning picture." As they dug deeper, a complex web of financial manipulation began to emerge. Mr. Thompson's modus operandi seemed to involve identifying vulnerable businesses, offering a lifeline, and then using that leverage to gain control. "Em," Lisa said gently, "I hate to say this, but it looks like Daniel might be caught in this man's web. The necklace. It could be a way of creating obligation, of tying Daniel to him emotionally as well as financially." Emma felt a surge of protective anger. Yes, Daniel had made mistakes, but he didn't deserve to be preyed upon like this. "We need to warn him," she said, her voice firm with resolve. As they left the cafe, Emma's mind was racing. She now understood that the threat to her marriage went beyond Daniel's secrecy. There was a bigger game at play, and they needed to act fast to protect not just their relationship, but Daniel's livelihood and integrity. Back at home, Emma shared everything she and Lisa had discovered with Daniel. His face grew increasingly pale as he listened. I've been such a fool, he whispered, slumping into a chair. I was so desperate for a solution that I didn't see what was right in front of me. Emma knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. We'll figure this out together, Daniel. But first, we need to know exactly what you've agreed to with Mr. Thompson. Every detail. As Daniel began to recount his interactions with the investor, Emma listened intently, her nurse's training kicking in as she mentally cataloged every important point. They were up against a formidable opponent, but Emma was determined. This crisis had nearly torn them apart, but now, it was bringing them back together, united against a common threat. The next morning, Emma woke with a start, her mind already racing with the day's challenges. She glanced at Daniel, still asleep beside her, his face peaceful for the first time in weeks. Quietly, she slipped out of bed and headed to the kitchen to start the coffee maker. As she waited for the coffee to brew, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Found something interesting. Call me when you can. 20 minutes and one hurried shower later, Emma was on the phone with her friend, Daniel, listening intently beside her. I did some more digging, Lisa explained, her voice crackling through the speaker. It turns out Mr. Thompson has a pattern of using gifts to create a sense of obligation. But here's the interesting part. In at least 2 cases, the recipients used this against him. They claimed it was an attempt at bribery and managed to wiggle out of their agreements. Emma and Daniel exchanged a look, a glimmer of hope kindling between them. So the necklace could actually be our way out? Daniel asked. Possibly, Lisa cautioned. But you'd need to tread carefully. This guy knows what he's doing. After hanging up, Emma turned to Daniel. I think we need to meet with Mr. Thompson. Face to face. Daniel paled slightly but nodded. You're right. No more hiding. We face this together. That afternoon found them sitting in the plush waiting room of Thompson Investments. The office, located in a sleek downtown high-rise, exuded wealth and power. Emma smoothed down her skirt nervously, the weight of the diamond necklace heavy in her purse. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand, drawing strength from each other. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, a polished receptionist called. Mr. Thompson will see you now. Alistair Thompson was every bit the distinguished businessman Emma had imagined. Tall, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he radiated confidence and power. But as he rose to greet them, Emma caught a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Daniel, he said smoothly, I wasn't expecting you today. And this must be your lovely wife. The necklace suits you, my dear. Emma met his gaze steadily. That's actually why we're here, Mr. Thompson. We need to talk about your gift and your arrangement with my husband. For a moment, Thompson's composure slipped, revealing a calculating look that sent chills down Emma's spine. But then he smiled, gesturing for them to sit. Of course, I'm all ears. What followed was one of the most intense conversations of Emma's life. She and Daniel laid out their concerns, backed by the information Lisa had uncovered. They made it clear that they understood the implications of the gift and Thompson's usual business practices. To their surprise, Thompson didn't become defensive. Instead, he listened intently, his expression gradually shifting from guarded to something almost resembling respect. I must say, he said finally, I'm impressed. Not many people have the courage to confront me like this. He leaned back in his chair, studying them. You're right, of course. The necklace was a calculated move on my part. But I think perhaps I've underestimated both of you. Emma held her breath, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Thompson continued. I'll be honest, I saw your company as an easy target, Daniel. But now, well, I think there might be potential for a genuine partnership here. As the meeting progressed, a new possibility began to emerge. Thompson, it seemed, was not entirely the villain they had feared. Impressed by their integrity and courage, he offered to restructure their agreement, providing the capital Daniel needed while allowing him to retain control of his company. By the time they left Thompson's office, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in months, the path forward seemed clear. As they stepped out into the Toronto sunshine, Daniel pulled Emma close. Thank you, he whispered, for believing in me, for fighting for us. I don't know what I'd do without you. Emma smiled, feeling the first real stirrings of hope. That's just it, Daniel. You don't have to do anything without me. Not ever again. Hand in hand, they walked towards home, ready to face whatever came next, together. The weeks following their meeting with Mr. Thompson were a whirlwind of activity. Daniel threw himself into revitalizing his business, armed with a new perspective and the capital needed to make necessary changes. Emma, true to her word, was by his side every step of the way, offering support and insight. One crisp autumn evening, they sat on their small balcony, mugs of hot tea warming their hands. The Toronto skyline glittered before them, a reminder of the city's endless possibilities. "I spoke with the accountant today," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Things are looking up, Em. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're on the right track." Emma smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "That's wonderful, Daniel. I'm so proud of you." Daniel's eyes misted over. "I couldn't have done it without you. I need you to know how sorry I am. For keeping secrets, for almost throwing away everything we've built." Emma set down her mug and turned to face him fully. "I know, Daniel, and I forgive you. But rebuilding trust, it's going to take time." He nodded solemnly. "I understand. And I'm committed to earning back your trust, no matter how long it takes." Over the next few days, they had a series of long, heartfelt conversations. They talked about their fears, their hopes, and the future they wanted to build together. Daniel opened up about the pressure he'd felt to be the provider, the shame that had driven him to secrecy. Emma shared her own insecurities, her fear of being left behind as Daniel's career had always seemed to take center stage. "I think," Emma said one night as they lay in bed, fingers intertwined, "that we both lost sight of what's truly important. It's not about the money or the status. It's about us, our partnership." Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, gazing at her intently. "You're right. I got so caught up in trying to provide a certain lifestyle that I forgot the most important thing, our life together." They began to make small but significant changes. Date nights became a weekly ritual, non-negotiable no matter how busy work became. They started a shared journal, writing to each other about their days, their feelings, their dreams. It felt almost like courting again, rediscovering each other in new ways. Emma found herself falling in love with Daniel all over again. She saw his determination to make things right, his renewed enthusiasm for his work now that he was approaching it with honesty and integrity. For his part, Daniel marveled at Emma's strength and compassion, ashamed that he had ever doubted her ability to stand by him through tough times. As autumn turned to winter, their condo became a warm haven against the cold Toronto nights. They spent evenings curled up on the couch, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. The diamond necklace, once a source of so much turmoil, now sat in its box on a high shelf, a reminder of the challenges they had overcome together. Spring arrived in Toronto, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to mirror the fresh start in Emma and Daniel's lives. The city bustled with energy as people emerged from the long winter, and the Carters found themselves swept up in the optimism of the season. Daniel's business had stabilized, thanks in large part to the restructured deal with Mr. Thompson. More importantly, Daniel had rediscovered his passion for his work, approaching each day with an enthusiasm that had been missing for far too long. Emma, inspired by their recent challenges, had taken on a leadership role in the hospital's newly formed financial counseling program for patients. She found deep satisfaction in helping others navigate the complex world of medical expenses, drawing on her own recent experiences to offer empathy and practical advice. One sunny Saturday, they decided to take a walk in High Park, enjoying the cherry blossoms in full bloom. As they strolled hand in hand, Emma marveled at how far they'd come. "Do you remember," she said, "when we used to come here right after we got married? We'd dream about our future, all the things we wanted to accomplish." Daniel nodded, a wistful smile on his face. "We had such big plans. Some of them came true, some didn't. But I don't think I ever imagined we'd be where we are now." "Are you disappointed?" Emma asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Not at all, Em. Sure, we've been through some tough times. But look at us now. We're stronger, more honest with each other. I think we're finally building the life we always dreamed of, just not in the way we expected." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "You're right. It's not about having the biggest house or the most impressive job. It's about facing life together, supporting each other through the good and the bad. As they continued their walk, they began to talk about the future again. But this time, their dreams were different. They talked about volunteering together, about mentoring young couples, about traveling not to luxurious resorts, but to places where they could make a difference. "You know," Daniel said as they headed home, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, "I think our story could help other couples. Maybe we could write a book or start a blog or something." Emma laughed, squeezing his hand. "Look at you, Mr. Entrepreneur, always thinking of the next big thing." "Hey, this time it's not about making money," he protested with a grin. "It's about sharing what we've learned, about love, trust, and the importance of facing challenges together." As they reached their apartment building, Emma stopped and pulled Daniel close for a kiss. "I love you," she whispered, "and I love the life we're building together." Daniel's eyes shone with emotion. "I love you too, Em. Always have, always will." 1 year later, Emma and Daniel stood in front of a small gathering in their living room, fingers intertwined. Friends, family, and even Mr. Thompson had come to celebrate their vow renewal ceremony. The past year had brought its share of challenges, but it had also been filled with growth, both individually and as a couple. Daniel's business was thriving, built on a foundation of integrity and transparency. Emma had been promoted to head of the hospital's financial counseling department, her compassion and experience making her a natural leader. But more importantly, their relationship had blossomed. The trust they had rebuilt proved to be stronger than ever, weathering small disagreements and celebrating tiny victories with equal grace. As they recited their vows, reaffirming their commitment to each other, Emma wore the silver locket Daniel had given her to replace the diamond necklace. The necklace that had once caused so much turmoil had been sold, the proceeds donated to a local charity supporting families facing financial hardships. "For better, for worse, and everything in between," they said in unison, their voices strong and sure. After the ceremony, as their guests mingled and celebrated, Emma and Daniel snuck a quiet moment on the balcony. The Toronto skyline sparkled before them, much as it had on that fateful night when they began to rebuild their life together. "So," Daniel said, wrapping his arm around Emma's waist, "what's next for us?" Emma leaned into him, a contented smile on her face. "I don't know exactly, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." As they rejoined their guests, both Emma and Daniel felt a sense of excitement for the future. Their journey had taught them that love, when nurtured with honesty and commitment, could withstand any challenge. And with that knowledge, they were ready to write the next chapter of their lives, stronger and more united than ever before. What did you think of Emma's story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.